Welcome to a Meji Media podcast called Life Mastery. Now, I started this podcast for a couple of reasons. Number one is a little bit selfish because I love listening to and spending time with interesting people. Number two is I want this to be a bit of a toolkit for people, young and old, to learn from people with diverse experiences. You'll hear conversations with entrepreneurs, Olympic athletes, top corporate leaders, and more. And they all have something valuable to share about what really matters in life. Along the way, I'll share some of my own experiences, the wins, the losses, the risks I've taken, and the moments of joy and tragedy. So listen with an open mind, and hopefully you'll take away something useful. Thank you and enjoy. In this episode of Life Mastery, we get into the secrets behind one of the most trusted voices in British sport. Darren Lewis, assistant editor of the Daily Mirror, CNN sports analyst and president of the Sports Journalists Association, has spent his career telling the stories that others are too afraid or too busy to tell. We talk about how he built the trust that led to one of the most powerful interviews of the year, when Vinicius Jr. opened up to him about racism, pressure and life under the spotlight. Darren shares how journalism will evolve in the age of AI, what technology will change forever and what must never be lost. And we dive into what he's learned about the real success, the habits, the mindset and courage it takes to rise in an industry built on rejection and resilience. It isn't just about football, it's about truth, trust and mastering the craft when the world keeps moving faster. Enjoy. Darren, I first met you through the work that I was doing with Include Summit a couple of years ago. And what really struck me was that you didn't come along to Manchester for the big stage. You came along and you spent 2 days talking to young people about what it meant to be successful and also mentored them along the way. And I thought that said a lot about your character. And now this podcast has always been a little bit more than just talking about success framed through money or status. And you could say that through what you've achieved, you clearly are successful. But one thing I picked up about you when I researched a little bit about why you got into journalism was that you said it was more than just the goals and trophies. It's about the sacrifices, the struggles, and the people that make those moments happen. So I'd like to start with that really. As a young boy watching football and somebody who fell in love with it, why was it that the human element was so important?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your podcast, Gurmej. It's a real honour to be a part of what you're doing. Second, I didn't even realise when I came up to the summit that I'd spent so long with the younger people. But then to me, I think spending that time with the younger people helped me to remember when I was younger, when I was aspiring to be in the industry that I've been a part of now for 30 years, including my time on local and regional newspapers. And when I was a young boy, I didn't come from a particularly well-off family at all. In fact, we were a big family in a small flat in East London. I'd read my dad's newspaper every time he came home. And I'd see people on TV that I wanted to emulate. And from a really early age, I wanted to be a journalist. But I look back now and actually, I probably don't give myself enough credit for the fact that I managed to get into an industry that had little to no diversity in certainly international sport. There was diversity in other areas, and over time, as you well know, many of us would come to know each other working in silos in different areas of a massive ecosystem. But certainly I didn't know anybody else, so I had no blueprint to follow. I had no mentor as such, except for my dad, who would always tell me that my education would be the key to the world, and he ended up being absolutely right.
So what was your earliest memory of writing? in terms of like journalism or, playing a role as a journalist?
My earliest memories of writing were in news journalism and not sports journalism. I worked for a newspaper in North London, and they were kind enough to give me a couple of days of work experience. And I think to this day that those days changed the course of my entire career, because we established a relationship in those days that would continue over the subsequent 3 years before I moved to regional and then national journalism. But it was local newspapers, and I was always, you asked a question earlier about the human side of things. I've always been interested in human interest stories. I've always been interested in people and what inspires them. Even now, I love reading autobiographies. I love reading about the journeys that have taken inspirational and extraordinary people to the top of their professions. And it could be anybody from Robbie O'Sullivan, who is just one of the most, he is the most gifted snooker player there's ever been, to Tony Adams, who was a fabulous defender, of course, for Arsenal. And for England, I've read about people like Bernardine Evaristo. There are so many different inspirational people that I've read all about, historical people. I just love backgrounds and stories and ways of being able to understand what motivates brilliant people to do brilliant things.
And it sounds like along the way you curated a lot of good relationships with people, and that's something that I think in your industry is very important. Can you share a time that maybe behind the scenes a tip or a relationship led you to get a big story that fans might not have typically known about? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, the most important story, I think, that's a story interview that I did for a long time for my money, was my interview with Vinicius Jr., which is still my pinned tweet on X, largely because of the importance, the significance of the player and the significance of what he had to say. It was an interview I did for CNN. And it was an interview that basically said to all of the lower profile people suffering racism across the football and sporting ecosystem that here was somebody massive prepared to use their space to speak about the issue and not worry about the consequences. And it was important to me because to have a player trust you, to invite you into his home and to sit in his living room and open up to me in the way that he did, would make it, especially when you consider he was at the time the best player on the planet for me, bar none. Even though Rodri would go on to be voted the Ballon d'Or winner, everybody knows that given the circumstances that Vinicius Jr. played under, the racism that he endured, the lack of protection he had from the officials, the abuse that he took from the stands, the criticism from sections, I know the stressed sections of the Spanish media, the insults that he took from the pundits on TV and on radio, for him to continue to perform week in, week out, and to win 2 Champions Leagues in 3 seasons in those circumstances wasn't just a brilliant football achievement, it was a magnificent sporting achievement. So for him to agree for me to come to his house in Spain, sit with him, talk with him, and understand why he broke down in tears as he talked about just how much pressure he'd been under and why he continued to put his chest out and say, I'll continue to do this because it's so important to me. Yeah, that was really, really, really important to me.
What did you sense from him when you were talking to him? Like, did you feel that this was his outlet to just bear everything like to the world? Or did you feel like it was a very frustrated person? I mean, was it a combination of everything?
I just sensed trust. It was just trust. Yes. And I'm using one word, but that one word is so powerful because it is the most powerful commodity that can be bestowed on any journalist. Trust. That what you want when you do an interview is for the interviewee to trust you so much that they are prepared to go beyond the basics. They're prepared to open up and be honest about where they stand and how they feel. And that's what he did with me. And it was just incredible to be able to to be the beneficiary of that in many respects.
I'll come on to some of the issues that you spoke about there in a little while, but going back to that, building up your reputation and trust, what do you think some of the key things that you've done over the years that have enabled you to build that reputation and trust amongst your peers, amongst the audience that reads what you do, and also going on from like being a print journalist to going into TV and an international TV station like CNN as well?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question because I have no idea.
But I mean, you must think about, I mean, look, you obviously carry yourself in such a way that people connect to you. So, I mean, was there something that happened when you were younger, or was there something that like maybe your dad had inspired you to do? Was there something that you thought that when you go into this job, this is what you need to do to not just improve your career, but just the way that you carry yourself?
I definitely think that I always think about how difficult it was for me to get into the industry. And once I got into the industry, how many obstacles I encountered. There were lots of people who were helpful, but I can't deny that there were one or two people who were obstructive. There were one or two rooms that I went into where I wasn't particularly comfortable. And I just wanted to make sure that if the young people came in, new people came in, whether they were male or female, black or white, young or old, that they just had a friendly face to say hello. The power of hello can't be overestimated enough. And the warmth that I experienced from some journalists, I wanted to be able to extend to other journalists. So I wish it was as deep. I wish it were deeper than that, but it isn't. It is fairly straightforward. I just wanted to be helpful and welcoming and supportive to you. It's a really easy thing, Gurmej, to talk about wanting the industry to be more inclusive and to be more diverse and to be more open to the many, many, many talents that are out there. But when you open those doors up, you then have to look after those talents as well. And if they come in, you need to be there for them, and you need to be able to support them and help create a culture that they feel a part of. And it starts at places like the Include Summit. If we're there, then it's our duty to make sure that the young people who are there feel connected, feel listened to, feel seen. And that's what I aim to do in situations like that.
So going back to what you said about some of those rooms that you didn't feel comfortable in, or you maybe felt there was a bit of obstruction there, how would you advise young people today to deal with that?
Well, sometimes it's important to take the initiative yourself, which I would do sometimes, and just go up to people and break the ice myself and not feel it was on them to do it. And because sometimes people are just as nervous or apprehensive as you are. And so there are ways of being able to break those barriers, and in more than a few cases that tended to be a way through, a way of breaching that or bridging that gap, if you like, and having a conversation, and suddenly there was a way of being able to have a conversation. Other ways of being able to do it: get stuck in, get involved in the asking of the questions, go and speak to players and bring that, because often journalists pull quotes. So it might be that it's you volunteer to go down the tunnel and get the quotes that everybody else needs, and then suddenly there's a reason for you to be having a conversation. There are lots of different ways, but for me, it was taking the initiative.
And do you feel that things have changed now more, say, in the last, would you say over the last 20 years, the last 10 years, the last 5 years, or do you still feel that there's a lot of the same barriers there?
Yeah, I think that things have changed, and that journalism more welcoming, because journalism has opened up. It's more diverse. There are more women involved now. There are more younger people involved. I think there's an understanding that because there are so many young people, everyone is a little bit nervous. There's a bit of trepidation in a lot of areas, and so everyone's there for everybody. And the climate, and the social climate in particular, isn't the same now as it was then. We were a very unreconstructed world back then, I'm sure you understand. And so language wasn't as monitored as it is now. Behaviors in some cases were not as monitored as it is now. So it was a very different world at the time. But now I think the journalistic contingent within sports is a very different place. There are lots of good people, all of whom are willing to help, support, guide, mentor. I tend not to struggle as president of the Sports Journalists Association to find people who are willing to support young journalists because they see the importance of paying it forward.
In many ways, like, I feel this myself, that there has been a lot of progress made, particularly when it comes to careers. Like you said, in journalism, you see it like on a Saturday and a Sunday afternoon on the TV, the diversity that's there now versus, say, 10, 15 years ago. But I don't know about you, Darren, but this summer, I feel like we've had a bit of another shift in just the culture and just the feeling around the country and the mood. I mean, I don't know what it's like where you live, but I drive on pretty much any street in the Midlands now, and there are like St. George's flags up and Union Jack's flags up. I don't know if you've seen the same, but I mean, I wondered if you felt a sense of there being a bit of a shift going back to an uglier time in the last few weeks, the last few months.
Well, as you know, I'm a columnist for the Daily Mirror as well, and the shift that I have noticed hasn't come in the last few weeks. It's come in the last 18 months to 2 years. Everybody remembers everyone likes to call it unrest and riots, but basically it was a period during the summer of 2024 where black or brown people were attacked on the basis of the colour of their skin. And In some quarters, I don't think it's reported as such, because to report that would be then to follow up with how it came to happen. And it came to happen because in certain areas, xenophobic and the extreme language was allowed to pass as legitimate discourse. And that continues to be the case at the moment, frankly. And it's the reason why there is an issue again, and has been for a long time. And I look at some mainstream TV programs, and there is a drip feed of this extremism which is allowed to flourish. And so it's not something that I've only just become concerned about. I think anybody who has been watching over the past 18 months to 2 years will feel the same. There are, and I've written many times about this in my column in the Daily Mirror, everybody wants to live peacefully. Everybody wants to live with their friends, families, neighbours, within their communities, with a sense of camaraderie and community. But sadly, there are people intent on tearing the country apart. And what we have to do is not let them.
You know, I definitely felt it last year when we did Include Summit. And I think there was a shift also within organisations and their sort of feeling around ED&I. I think, you know, there was a big push towards ED&I around the BLM movement, say 4 or 5 years ago. And I think a lot of the, I would say, there has been a lot of hate towards the term ED&I or DEI, as they call it in America. And I think a lot of that was because of a misunderstanding of what it really is as well. I think a lot of organizations just created roles around ED&I just for the sake of it, to tick a box, without really understanding what it is. So if I ever said to people, is it good to get more young people off the streets into sports and physical activity and healthy living? Everyone's going to say, yeah, it's a great idea. I think it's definitely something that we'll all support. And that would be people from all walks of life. But if we called Include Summit an equality, diversity and inclusion event, people thought, well, you know, that's not good. You know, you're just giving more opportunities to women for the sake of it, more opportunities to black people for the sake of it. You know, you're giving more media coverage to the trans cause. And I think there has been a lot of misinformation about what equality, diversity and inclusion really means. And I think that a lot of organizations, larger corporate organizations and government organizations, have a responsibility to work on educating people more on what it means.
See, this is possibly one of the few areas where I slightly disagree with you, Gurmej, in so much as I don't think there ever was a misunderstanding of what equality, diversity and inclusion is or was. I just think that lots of people engaged in it to tick boxes and do the right thing. And in a lot of areas, there were people who identified this straight away, but there were also people who simply didn't want to recognize the need to level the playing field. There were lots of people who wanted to retain the power dynamic and the advantages that they had become used to. And at the same time, there were lots of people who wanted to pit both groups against each other. But I still want to believe in the good that a lot of people are trying to do, the important work that people are trying to do. And that's work that isn't in a spotlight. It might not be front and center. It's work that just very often is unfashionable. It's in silence, it's in the background, but it's helping people, it's supporting people. I've seen many times in sport, people unwilling to understand, not unable, unwilling to understand why moves are being made to ensure that a particular sport or a particular aspect of sport is representative of the people who watch it. So, for example, when there were discussions about what is known as the Rooney Rule in football, in other words, based on a scheme in American football where if you interview for a new head coach, you have to interview a person of color. I know lots of people here who said, why should black or brown people have jobs on a plate? And A, the Rooney Rule is not and never has been jobs on a plate. B, black or brown potential coaches would never want jobs on a plate. They would want to go through fair and equitable processes just like anybody else. And C, when lots of people say the best person for the job, they very often mean the person who looks like that, because in the year 2025, you cannot possibly tell me that the best person for any job is always from one demographic. It's just not possible. And it might be possible once or twice, 3 times, 4 times, but not 10 times out of 10. But at the moment in English football, we have just 2, if I'm not mistaken, black or brown managers. And we are in a place where we are struggling, basically, to ensure that football is representative of the people who watch the game. We have less than a handful of black or brown officials out. So 92 matches of a week, 92 Class A football every weekend. And of all the officials that take charge of those games, less than a handful are black or brown. So when people talk about the best person for the job, you only have to look at the ecosystem to see that that quite clearly is not the case. And I come from a background, you've got me started here now, Gurmej, where for many years these questions have been asked. And when the questions were first asked about why there are not more black or brown managers, for example, people said, well, do they take their badges? So what would happen is when players, black or brown players, retired from the game, what they did was they went and got their qualifications. They went and got their badges. They did all the things that people said they hadn't done in order to get a job. Then they said, well, do they start at the bottom and work their way up? They can't expect to get jobs handed to them on a plate at the top level. So guess what? Those managers went to the bottom level and worked their way up. And still, the top division is not representative of those players. And people say, well, there are enough of them. Over 40% of the playing contingent in the Premier League is black or brown. So that's that box checked. And slowly and surely you can just see that the culture is such that no matter how good a player you were, if you were black or brown, no matter how good a strategist, a leader, a goal scorer, how much of a fan favorite you were, opportunities are limited if you are black or brown. Within football, when you finish playing, the game has no more use for you. And to my mind, that cannot continue to be the case. So we do have to continue talking about it. We do have to continue raising it. It's our duty to be able to do that in a constructive environment where we can all understand just what the picture looks like and why it is important to have this conversation.
And have you seen any solutions that could work in this situation? Because it seems like people have been talking about this for 30 years. And as you said, there's only 2 ethnic minority or 3 ethnic minority managers in the whole football league. So nothing seems
like there is a mystical solution, and there isn't. No, the solution is for owners and chairmen to recognize the talent, the leadership talent within their playing contingent. Part of the problem is that if you look within the clubs in the 92 club football ecosystem, there isn't that much diversity within the leadership and administration teams within those clubs. So again, you have a problem. If you look at the leadership of football within the English game, there isn't that much diversity within the organizations that run the sport in this country. So the last 5 years have given us an opportunity to change that, but sadly, that's all turned to dust.
And I was just going to just say that I've been hearing it within my own community for years and years and years that there hasn't been like an Asian Premier League football star, and we still haven't seen that sort of influx of players. I mean, you hear of 1 or 2 making it through to academies and maybe playing in the lower leagues, but again, we don't see it, and it can't be because there's a lack of talent out there, because I know that there's a lot of parents, maybe my generation, who really push their kids into football now. It used to happen in hockey that people would say, well, some of the Asian players aren't fit enough. They're just not fit enough to play that level of international hockey. But then that sort of myth has been debunked by the Indian national team that have consistently beaten the Great Britain national team hockey. So it's nothing to do with background. So there are those issues still at play there, and not just in the managerial or the board level, but also in the playing level when it comes to other communities as well.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I think I'm not sure that we can address this problem without continuing to speak about it, even though the climate might not lend itself to that conversation being had. But I think a lot of organizations within the current climate feel empowered, even more so, to do away with their responsibility in the share. And to be honest with you, it's to their detriment, really, because it at a very basic level, it makes economic sense to be reflective of the people who watch the game and who play on parks and who aspire to be a part of the game, because they will be more engaged in it. But I think, as I said before, you asked me about why I am driven to say and do and write the things I do. It is because I see that for our children, the opportunities are there, and for our adults, once you get to a certain point after playing the game, no matter how decorated a hero you might be, and no matter what you have achieved within sport, how much of a fan favorite you might be, the opportunity to lead beyond the pitch doesn't present itself.
Sure. I could talk about this with you all day. I'm just conscious of your time, so I've got a few more questions that I want to cover with you. With the pressure of what you do, and I'd say the pressure is even more in this day and age to make sure you get to the truth. How do you personally manage your energy and your mental well-being? Because this is something that comes up a lot for young people.
That's a really good question. And I often tell people, young people that I go and talk to and work with, but they do have a duty to look after themselves. This is the best job in the world, but it can also be all-consuming. And with that in mind, it is important for us to look after ourselves. We all know, wellness, well-being can sometimes be dismissed by some people who say, to comment the old phrase, greed is good. Can go and do it all and get it all, get the bag. blah blah blah. But I think you can't be your best self and bring your best self to work if your battery's low, that emotionally, psychologically, as well as physical. And so it is important to look after yourself and to take that time away and to not let the job, any job, consume you. And this is, as I said before, an industry where the rewards are so good. But in order to avail yourself of those rewards, it's important to keep yourself in good shape, to look after yourself.
So what's your workout routine then? Now I'll put you on the spot.
Well, I've got a treadmill at home, I have to admit. I try very often to get the right amount of sleep. I try very often to spend as much time with my family, who are really important to me. And I try to manage my time. That's a really key thing for me, managing my time as well, like as best I can. Because I think that it is crucial in being able to ensure that I am able to do what I need to do in the areas that I need to do it.
And I guess with your industry and your role, that's probably more challenging than in other industries, because you never know when a story is going to pop up, do you? And you never know when you're going to have to interview somebody or write about something, and you might have time blocked for family time blocked for your health, and suddenly that's all thrown up in the air because, you know, the next big transfer or the next big stories come out. And especially in your role now as editor or assistant editor of the Mirror, the newspaper, you've got to be on the ball at all times.
Yeah, the job has always been all-consuming, only in so much as there's never a convenient time for a story to break. And I think when you get into journalism, you get into it well aware that is the case, and you have to understand with that, if you've got to write on a Sunday, then you've got to write on a Sunday. If you've got to write on a Saturday night just before you're due to go to dinner, well, that's what you've got to do. Obviously, it depends on the situation, because it might well be that something can wait for a couple of days. But in general terms, particularly in our interconnected world where stories don't wait because there are so many other talented people out there with the wherewithal to be able to acquire information, it's important to be able to respond effectively if you are in a position to do so.
And do you just see that as a trade-off on your personal life, or do you just have to manage that with your family at the time? Just say you've got something planned with your family and then that story breaks. Do you see it as something that you say, well, look, this is the job I've got and it has to be dealt with? Or do you think, all right, I've missed this dinner this time, so we have to put it in the diary some other time?
Oh, no. Very often I try to make it work, whatever I'm doing. I try to make it work. And I try to make sure that if there is something that I need to do, it can wait an hour. I mean, obviously having a phone means that you can probably spend 20 minutes typing something out. The skeleton of a story, if you like. If you're sitting at a dinner table, I wouldn't recommend it, obviously. Particularly as phones at a table are normally banned for my family, so I've got to live by that standard as well. But I do recognize that there are extreme moments when something might need to be responded to.
For sure. And I think sometimes even with my family, 3 kids, we try and have at least one day a week where we're all going to sit down for dinner together. You know, I've got 3 young kids and they've all got like different clubs on different days, so we're like between us, we're like ferrying them around, so it can be difficult. But just having that one bit of time with your family, it's so important. At least once a week to all of you talk, share what you've been feeling and like just weekly reflections. And I think it's invaluable, really. And you mentioned something there about the joys of modern technology, one of these. But I want to ask you, and I'm sure this is something that you're talking about a lot within media at the moment, AI. What are people in your industry thinking about the future, and how are you now thinking about how you'd advise young people about getting into journalism when it comes to AI?
We've been living in an interconnected world for a long time. And so there are lots of people who talk about AI, technology, and lots of related areas of evolution within our sport, within our industry, as though they are new things that they've got to be grappled with. But technology is a wonderful thing. Obviously, there are very, very obvious dangers and concerns which are shared by everybody. But in general terms, the advance of technology is a good thing for our industry. It enables us to do things faster. The downside is that we have gone from a 24-hour news cycle to one that lasts less than an hour. And we also have a situation where attention spans have fallen through the floor. And they are the real world, if you like, results of the changes. But I think in terms of technology and what it allows you to do and the way that it allows you to do it, they are all really important. What I would say is that what AI won't change is the ability to do the kind of stories that I love doing, which are human interest stories. There will never be a substitute for talking to people, listening to people, understanding people, learning from people. I don't think there'll be a substitute for that humanity and that ability to evoke emotion. And because those things are you can't program that into a machine, a laptop, a phone, whatever. But the two can coexist. And for my money, it's the reason why we are in a very exciting period.
You've put that in a really nice way, but is there ever a temptation to, I guess, compete with the TikTok stars and sensationalize every single moment and just get that 10-second viral clip that's going to be played around the world over and over again for that, as you said, 1 hour?
I don't think, and I've always been of this opinion ever since I was taught it myself, there'll never be a substitute for a good story. There'll be shock moments. There will always be shock moments. And shock moments didn't begin with the introduction of TikTok. They've been here for years and years and years. They're all just compressed into one space and one particular platform at the moment. But I think in terms of a story, in terms of something that's going to keep you hooked, gripped, in terms of something that is going to be compelling and leaves you with questions that you want answered, I think to have a good story will always be important to my mind. And again, listen, the two can coexist. There is now a market for everything. So that can easily be the case, but it isn't something that certainly I don't find myself drawn towards. I much, as you've known me for a long time, Gurmej says, I like to listen to people. I like to hear their stories. I like to learn from their stories. I like to hear them. And I think for me, that will continue to be the case.
And I think you're absolutely right. There is a market for everything, whether it be a long form conversation like this. You think about someone like Joe Rogan, biggest podcast in the world, can go on for like 3 hours. And there's a market for a really good story in a newspaper. People still want to read, The Economist or the Mirror or the Times or whatever it might be. And there's a market for that TikTok star who's going to put something out for a a 10-second viral clip. So, you're definitely right. Everything can coexist. Last couple of questions. When you look ahead, what kind of legacy do you hope to leave, both in journalism and the fight for equality?
We could speak. Ask me some questions today. I've never really thought about legacy, but I think I'm already proud and pleased of the fact that sport is having a conversation about the people who have not been given anywhere near the credit they deserve, and the people who do not get anywhere near the opportunities they are entitled to, having played the game for the same number of years, shared a pitch, shared trophies, shared success as their counterparts. And so for me, that work is ongoing. I think it's too soon, frankly, to be talking about legacy. I don't think I'm important enough to be talking about legacy. I think that there are real pioneers out there who have done some great work. I'm just honored to have been a part of that movement to make sure that the future for younger people is laden with opportunities that they can, well, first of all, that they will have earned, and second of all, that they can take advantage of.
And going back to the younger people, what advice, just a couple of nuggets that you could provide to younger people, given your experience and where you see the future lying at the moment?
Yeah, I see a lot, to be fair. Sometimes people ask me about advice, but I'm always inspired by the many young people who work incredibly hard across lots of different platforms. And hard work is a weapon. I think that's something that people don't realize. Hard work is a weapon. It's a skill, and it's not something that somebody can take away from you. And if you have that willingness to commit time, work hard, be creative, believe in yourself, and put one foot in front of the other, then you'll be amazed before you're halfway through your career. And I think I already see people doing exactly that. That's what inspires me in many respects. I'm around young people all the time who are hungry to build on what has gone before them. And I have a son myself. He's 19 years of age at the moment, and he is hungry to work hard, to be better, to push himself. And so, yeah, that's that. People do often ask me for advice, and I'm always quite loath to give it because I think to myself, well, what do I know? But I think it is incredibly important to have that belief in yourself. The most powerful voice you can listen to is your own. And so you need to be able to teach yourself how to work hard, how to push through, how to commit yourself to your career, and how not to be deflected by the setbacks that every single person within this ecosystem has. Being able to commit yourself and have that belief will take you a long way.
And do you know what's amazing about that? We've talked so much about how much the world is changing, like the ebbs and flows of like everything that you've been fighting for, the transition into a world driven by AI. But one thing stands true, and it was true when like your dad was talking to you when you were younger, and it's true how you're talking to your son and to other young people. Now I talk to my kids. Hard work, be consistent, get out there, do the work, and good things can happen. And I think that's just amazing advice for any young person. So,
Yeah,
Darren,
Yeah, I would say this. Sometimes you can work hard, you can go out, and you can give 100% on a day-to-day basis, and it might not happen in the short term. It might be that your head drops. It might be that you might feel disillusioned. But with every day that you work hard, you put yourself closer to something positive happening than you do if you don't put that work in. And you are creating your own opportunities by continuing to be committed. So I would still say that's the way forward. And unless you quite rightly said, Gurmej, you and I, we come from a generation where many people told us, because of the social inequalities that there had been, that we had to work twice as hard to be half the opportunities. Excuse me. And that's something that we carry all the way through our careers, and we teach our children and we teach the young people that we work with. But as I say, there are so many young people, talented, hardworking, creative geniuses out there. And everyone has their own furrow to plow. And it's about continuing day after day.
Darren, thank you so much for your time. I know you've got to get off to another meeting. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate the work you do. And I really appreciate the advice that you've given to everyone who's going to listen to this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Gurmej. I really appreciate you inviting me onto your podcast, and I wish you the very best with it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Life Mastery. To hear more about our podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is my name, Gurmej Singh Pawar, Meji Media, or follow my Instagram page, which is events_Gurmej. And we also have a website, which is www.mejimedia.com. And all other ways to follow us will be available in the show notes, including TikTok, X, LinkedIn, and all the rest of it. Thanks again for listening, and speak to you soon.